Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Democratic House prosecutors have now begun their opening arguments for removing President Donald Trump from office. A new and substantive stage of the second day of the Senate impeachment trial. If day one felt like an extended question, can I get a witness? Day two has felt like the extended accusation one would expect in a criminal prosecution. The managers presenting evidence that the president abused his office to stay in power, that he did so knowingly, and that he did so with a ton of help over a long period of time. Now, that alleged abuse is clearly legally impeachable, the managers explained, citing everyone from Alexander Hamilton to Donald Trump's own attorney general, who has recently written, this was while Trump was in office, that a president is, quote, answerable for any abuses of discretion and is ultimately subject to the judgment of Congress through the impeachment process. Congressman Schiff brought those receipts to the Senate floor and argued they show something very bad for Trump, that even his own attorney general could not defend his own president in this trial.
You will hear the president's lawyers make the astounding claim that you can't impeach a president for abusing the powers of his office. Couldn't go to Bill Barr for that opinion. Couldn't go to even Jonathan Turley, their expert in the House, for that opinion. No. They had to go outside of these experts, outside of the constitutional law, to a criminal defense lawyer and professor. And why? Because they can't contest the facts.
Schiff, they're starting with the law and moving to the facts. And the prosecutors today used those facts, that evidence, to make the case Trump's abuse of power means he must be held accountable.
The president put his own interests above the national interest, undermined the integrity of our free and fair elections, threatened our national security. He believes that he's above the law. He can do anything he wants.
The president personally made this decision even after his own appointed advisors warned him that it wasn't in our country's interest to withhold the aid.
Who benefited from this scheme?
An impeachable offense aimed at destroying the impeachment power itself. As you will hear in the coming days, President Trump has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance.
What did the president know? And when did he know it?
That concludes our introduction.
There you have it. That's the emerging case against Trump presented on the Senate floor, a case reverberating around the nation, televised starting now for 3 straight days. So a lot of people are hearing it. We can measure that. But there are other developments suggesting that some of the very jurors in the room may not be weighing all the evidence. That's according to some spicy new remarks from a Republican senator.
If you poll the senators, 9 out of 10 will tell you they have not read the transcript of the House hearings, and the 10th is lying to you.
Are the senators sleeping on some of the most important evidence of this era? And also, while we're asking questions, are they literally sleeping? There are no cameras pointing at the gallery where the senators sit for the trial because the U.S. Senate actually controls those, but there are still journalists and sketch artists who can see everyone in the room. One artist catching Republican Senator Risch sneaking a few winks, as the artist put it here. Now, the president's most voluble defender, meanwhile, weighing in off the Senate floor.
Yesterday was about 11 hours of them telling us how bad their case was. If I were the president, I wouldn't cooperate with these guys at all. Schiff, Nadler, and Pelosi impeached this president in 48 days. I wouldn't give them the time of day. I'm covering up nothing. I'm exposing your hatred of this president to the point that you would destroy the institution.
Cover-up's a big word, and you can debate it. But as for evidence, even this president now admitting he didn't supply the material for this trial requested under constitutional law.
We're doing very well. I got to watch enough. I thought our team did a very good job. But honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
They don't have the material. The president running away from cooperation required under law and flying away from Washington. Clearly, he still has this Judgment Day on his mind. He also rattled off something of a detailed rebuttal to different requested witnesses.
I'd love to have Mick go. The problem with John is that it's a national security problem. He knows some of my thoughts. He knows what I think about leaders. So I'd love to have Mike Pompeo testify, but it's a national security problem. Rick Perry would love to testify, but we're dealing with national security.
As Donald Trump argues that there is a reason, security or otherwise, that each and every famous requested person in his cabinet can't speak, the Washington Post reported that some Senate Democrats might be exploring a way whether to do a witness swap. I could tell you, though, in our reporting, we spoke with several senators on record now who dismiss that concept, saying they won't trade relevant witnesses for irrelevant ones. Now, as the prosecutors make their case in these next 3 days of the trial, they have an open court. There will be no rebuttals from the Trump side under these rules until Saturday. And that makes it less likely that there will be the kind of live-action spats that we saw in the late night of this pre-opening argument debate, which had, at a moment that I think many people will reflect on, the Chief Justice of the United States of America reminding the people arguing that this is still a trial setting with rules for civil discussion.
They insist that the president has done nothing wrong, and they lie. And lie, and lie, and lie.
The only one who should be embarrassed, Mr. Nadler, is you.
I think it is appropriate at this point for me to admonish both the House managers and the President's counsel in equal terms to remember that they are addressing the world's greatest deliberative body. Members avoid speaking in a manner and using language that is not conducive to civil discourse. I do think those addressing the Senate should remember where they are.
Remember where you are. It's not every day or every year or even, as a mathematical matter, every decade you're going to see the Chief Justice tell these people, the president's lawyers, and, as he said, the House managers, to shape up. Now, these arguments will continue, Democrats at times striking a confident note about their evidence, perhaps looking beyond just the 100 senators in that room. Consider House manager and one of Pelosi's deputies, Brooklyn Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, taking an iconic line from a legendary Brooklyn rapper, the Notorious B.I.G., as a direct answer to the lawyer for the president, Donald Trump's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, who had asked, "Why are we here?"
We are here, sir, to follow the facts, apply the law, be guided by the Constitution, and present the truth to the American people. That is why we are here, Mr. Sekulow. And if you don't know, now you know.
It is Thursday, the 23rd of January of 2020. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh my. Hey, I know that a lot of people have a real regional affiliation towards the grit. Some people do not consider it to be part of jambalaya life. Well, I disagree wholly. I've only had some of the best grits I've ever had in New Orleans, okay? Now, that's not to take away Georgia or North Carolina or any of the other places that, honor the grit. But I got to tell you, when they tell you to make the grit with water, they're lying to you. You got to use milk, all right? That's the secret. You got to have the milk in the grits. Okay. Well, Isn't Adam Schiff making too many speeches for the ages? I mean, come on. How many oratorical flourishes can one guy have in a lifetime? Wow. Boy, I'm sure glad he's on our side. Of course, the other side doesn't care about rhetoric, reason, or the law, apparently. And that was pretty much evidenced at the top when Ari was breaking down pretty much what we can surmise by the GOP's cavalier attitude. We're looking at you, Lindsey Graham. Did you know that he left in the middle of the hearing, or in the middle of Schiff's opening statement, not the middle of the hearing, but in the middle of Schiff's statement, and left for a full 30 minutes? Then he wandered back in, went over and stood by a seat, then went into the cloakroom and had some coffee. And John Roberts did not sanction him. There was no condoning of behavior, not even for both sides. Probably because our people stayed still and drank water. They could have some milk, too. That's all they're allowed. But apparently, as I mentioned in the show notes, the cavalier attitude of the GOP senators shows that to them, impeachment rules, witnesses, documents, and a soberly rational, comprehensive legal presentation are for suckers. Rules that they made up, by the way, that we are following, and they break them. I actually think that those Americans who are paying attention see this for what it is. It is a cover-up. The GOP, with their cavalier attitude, are not representing the American constituents that they are supposed to be representing. And those constituents know it. Now, there are some who say, oh, well, man, the stock market is booming. Yeah, well, I got to tell you, there's a lot of people who don't play the stock market because they don't have the money for it. And the economy is not helping them. And when you have a bunch of senators who have such a cavalier attitude, no wonder there's only one camera fixed. They can't roam in that chamber. If there was a camera pointing back at the senators in their seats, we would see what civic participation really means to real Americans. Those who are following the rules and sitting in their seats and taking it in and taking notes. And those who are not. And you can see a defined line between those two groups. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, the Court of Appeals of the Ninth Circuit ruled that the Trump administration cannot force bogus sex ed on teens. Yeah, well, we'll see how that works. Because there's still coaches doing their thing, I gotta tell you. The ACLU demanded answers on the censored Women's March photo and any other photos the National Archives have that had been similarly altered. There's more? Oh, my. And a major judicial ethics committee warned sitting federal judges not to affiliate with the Federalist Society. Oh, my. Well, you're only about 30 years too late. After the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where the French Senate passed a bill allowing in vitro fertilization for single women and lesbians. Well, that's what the French are calling them. Just saying. And in an Olympic year, Japan faces a decision over radioactive contaminated Fukushima water. All that and more. On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. So do engage and say hi. Hi. If you would then take a look to the leftish of the page from that chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. With little effort, you will notice our Patreon link, and if you could, please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We need it now more than ever. And we do thank those who have been so generous over these many years, allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, so many eons ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam on Twitter. Go ahead, follow me there. I dare you. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and I get that out on social media where you can find it at Justice Putnam, but you can also find it at the show's Twitter account at Cookbook West. And most importantly, do pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Alrighty. Well, why don't we go right ahead and jump into these offerings that we have curated for you today. And this first one does come... Oh, wow. What? Oh, I see what I did. I had one already up in tabs, and I opened up a new tab, but I didn't need to, so let's close that one. This comes out of the American Independent by Lisa Needham. Earlier this month, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit delivered a resounding victory for reproductive health rights when it issued a ruling in Planned Parenthood v. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It also delivered a resounding pushback against the Trump administration, which has made a singular focus of attacking even the most celebrated and effective reproductive health care measures. Because apparently if the black guy likes something, you gotta stop that thing from ever happening again. Ever. In this lawsuit, Planned Parenthood challenged a recent Trump administration mandate that the Department of Health and Human Services direct money to abstinence-only programs, which are notoriously ineffective at preventing teen pregnancy. Trump's new rule radically changed the nation's approach to preventing teen pregnancy. The Obama administration took a multi-pronged approach to decrease teen pregnancy rates, so of course Trump has to have only one thing to do, and that's get rid of it. If Obama had a lot of different approaches, Trump has one. So, funding organizations that promoted safer sex, these are the measures that Obama took. Address gender roles, work to increase teen self-confidence, and more. And that approach helped birth rates for teens reach an all-time low in the country in 2017. In theory, that should have been the end of the discussion. HHS was employing an approach that had been wildly successful. But when Trump came into office, he brought with him a number of religious conservatives obsessed with controlling and suppressing teen sexuality rather than addressing it in a reasonable, healthy way. One that acknowledges that a substantial number of teenagers have sex, as they always have. The most notable of these religious conservatives is Trump's vice president, Mike Pence. Pence has spent much of his political career trying to shutter Planned Parenthood, and he doesn't even believe basic truths about reproductive health, like the fact that condoms prevent the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. That stance requires Pence to completely ignore reality and government data from both the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control. As vice president, Pence has spearheaded a major shift in funding from giving money to organizations that provide comprehensive reproductive health care to giving to organizations that refuse to provide birth control and then spread misinformation about abortions based on their religious beliefs. Of course, Pence is not the only problem here. Before she joined the administration, HHS Deputy Assistant Secretary Diane Foley ran these types of organizations, also known as crisis pregnancy centers. She also said demonstrating how to put on a condom could be sexual harassment. Another Trump official, Valerie Huber, now a senior policy advisor in the Office of Global Affairs at HHS, was in charge of the National Abstinence Educators Association. Boy, can you imagine going to their confab? You know there's a lot of sex going on at that hotel when they have that confab. And Huber has also been largely responsible for a key shift in messaging about abstinence-only education. Now, let's be clear. Trump doesn't believe in abstinence-only. Give me a break. He doesn't believe in stopping comprehensive education. Well, actually, he probably does because he's an idiot, and he figures the more you know, the worse it is. Trump is a panderer. He brought in these religious extremists because it benefits him politically. He doesn't have any intellectual, moral foundation for any of this. The only thing he needs to know was, did Obama use this program to great effect, and how can I get rid of it? Ashraf Khalil of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya and a little bit of spice in your life. And don't forget, milk in the grits. Not chicken stock, not water, milk. Okay, Dateline Washington. The American Civil Liberties Union is demanding answers from the National Archives in the wake of a scandal over politically motivated edits to a photo of the 2017 Women's March. Oh, you mean you're trying to gaslight us? The rights group filed a Freedom of Information Act request on Wednesday yesterday, demanding all correspondence relating to the decision to censor elements of the photo as well as any information on other photos at the National Archives that had been similarly altered. There's more? Could there be more? The archives quickly apologized over the weekend when the Washington Post revealed that a large photo of the Women's March on display at the National Archives had several protest signs altered to blur out both Donald Trump's name and references to female body parts. An apology alone is not enough, the ACLU spokesman Abdullah Hassan said. The public needs to know more. The organization is seeking clarity on how the decision was made and who was involved. The National Archives is an independent agency that is meant to be nonpartisan. The archivist of the United States, David S. Ferriero, was appointed in 2009 by then President Barack Obama. Wait until Trump finds out he will be replaced. The original posted apology from the archives began with the sentence, "We made a mistake, But the ACLU is rejecting that characterization. A mistake is tripping and spilling coffee on the photo, blurring signs critical of Trump, or referencing women's bodies as a deliberate act, said ACLU Deputy Legal Director Luis Melling. Doctoring the photo was nothing less than Orwellian. Instead of documenting history, the National Archives had altered history to mask criticism of the president and erase our bodies. The archive said the photo in question is not one of its archival records, but rather was licensed for use as a promotional graphic in an exhibit on the women's suffrage movement. In announcing the reversal over the weekend, the statement from the National Archives said the institution will immediately begin a thorough review of its policies and procedures for exhibits so, quote, that this does not happen again, end quote. Oh, you mean we find out about it? And let's be clear about something else here. They are admitting that they were using a graphic that was licensed for promotional use, and they altered that photo that was copyrighted to someone and an entity other than them. So, what's a little violation of copyright law when you're gaslighting history? Matthew Chapman of Raw Story brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Judicial Conference's Code of Conduct Committee, a national panel of high-ranking federal judges responsible for policy making in U.S. courts, released a draft advisory opinion warning federal judges against affiliating with the Federalist Society, one of the nation's foremost associations of conservative and libertarian lawyers. Well, that's a nice way of putting it. The opinion also singled out the American Constitution Society, the Federalist Society's progressive counterpart, because in this reporter's opinion, you gotta both sides everything when you're on the right. Come on. Back to the article. The committee advises that formal affiliation with the American Constitutional Society or the Federalist Society, whether as a member or in a leadership role, is inconsistent with canons 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the code, stated the opinion. Hell, what happened to 3? Official affiliation with either organization could convey to a reasonable person that the affiliated judge endorses the views and particular ideological perspectives advocated by the organization, and it calls into question the affiliated judge's impartiality on subjects as to which the organization has taken a position, and generally frustrate the public's trust in the integrity and independence of the judiciary. Now I know why John Roberts blamed both sides when the White House lawyers were lying their asses off, and when they were finally called out for their lying, Roberts had to say, now kids, you gotta play nice. Now you over there lying, you stop that, and you over there stop making trouble by calling out their lies. You're both little brats. And if you don't behave, I'm gonna stand you in the corner. So, I want to know how many American Constitutional Society lawyers have been fast-tracked to the judiciary by Mitch McConnell. And I would say that the American Constitutional Society, their canons, is equal protection and due process under law, which apparently to this watchdog committee, a very extreme measure in today's new a-go-go politics. The Federalist Society has long been known as a pipeline for Republican judicial nominees to be groomed and considered for the federal bench, including many of Trump's appointees. Well, I would say that he's only taking Federalist Society judges. But sometimes these nominees that he's elevated are so extreme that even the Federalist Society wouldn't want them, but Trump does. Moreover, many sitting federal judges maintain close ties with the group. Last year alone, 23 judges, all appointed by Republicans, spoke at the annual Federalist Society convention. You know how many judges spoke at the ACS? 0. Officially, the organization has long maintained that it is not an advocacy group, but merely a forum for a debate for legal scholars. Oh, yeah. However, a recent report revealed that the Federalist Society has secretly been engaging in political activism for years with its president, Eugene Maya, assuring donors in private that the group would teach federal judges to advance conservative goals such as environmental, banking, and labor deregulation. My, it's almost like they were doing it in secret right out in the open, huh? Well, why don't we get to our break? And when we get back from that break, you do know that we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, not so fast. Much like the action in 1917, the kudos have come on hard and fast for this one, and it is an achievement. It's a minimalist story told in an epic way. A British enlisted man from World War I is pulled from trench duty for a mission across enemy or disputed territory to warn another division that a planned attack is a trap. As the action is being set up, we become aware of the film's visual convention, which is that the whole thing seems like a continuous shot, with the camera following our heroes out of the grimy trenches through a gruesome house of combat horrors towards their destination. Oscar-winning director Sam Mendes and top-notch cinematographer Roger Deakins combined for a detail-rich first-person ride that is suspenseful and leaves no doubt as to the nature of war. Because of the technique, we see the protagonist, George McKay's Lance Corporal Schofield, for the film's entire runtime, which makes his acting grade that for the movie, and it's good. But 1917's visual style comes at a price with respect to character development and historical context. The reason why Schofield's partner is chosen may be obvious, but it's worthy of some dialogue, which could have noted its cruelty and maybe worked in the morale issues amongst British troops at that point in the war. And we find out little of the characters' inner or family lives, and no effort is made to contextualize the overall struggle in the light of nationalism. War may be hell, and it's presented so here, but this war featured no moral imperative. Unquestioning patriotism, which has its fans in high places today, fills the void, and this movie leaves it unquestioned. See 1917, but then go home and watch All Quiet on the Western Front. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Antarctica is a lonely continent, but the Antarctic Peninsula, the little tail that juts out towards South America, is a hub of human activity. More than 50 scientific research stations are based there, and in a recent travel season, 42,000 tourists visited, mostly from cruise ships. Problem is, when humans go somewhere, hitchhikers come with, like a non-native flightless midge, an insect that has already taken up residence in the peninsular region.
And its biomass is greater than the biomass of all the other invertebrates in the soil. It's already kind of taking over the nutrient cycling in that environment.
Kevin Hughes is an environmental researcher with the British Antarctic Survey. He and a team of experts recently reviewed a list of 103 marine and terrestrial species that might be poised to take up residence on the continent. From that list, they pinpointed the 13 most likely to arrive, establish themselves, and become invasive in the next decade. At the top, mussels, which stick to ships and could carpet shorelines and smother native species. Antarctic shores and shallow waters could also fill with crabs, which haven't existed in those habitats for millions of years.
So the communities are just not used to these sorts of predators coming in, and the potential for crabs to jump away at what's sitting on the seabed is quite a frightening prospect.
On land, the scientists flagged a mite, a springtail, and several species of buttonweed plants as potential invaders. The full list is in the journal Global Change Biology.
We have to kind of remember that Antarctica is really one of the last great wildernesses that we have on the planet. So we want to keep this place pristine for us to do scientific research because it's told us so much about how the world works, how our climate works, how ecosystems can be put together and how they function. So it's just incredibly important that we just keep it as pristine as we possibly can.
But that task keeps getting more difficult because climate change is slowly thawing the frozen continent, making it easier for invaders to gain a foothold. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Did you know that when you vote for president, you're actually not voting for your candidate?
I'm Tom Hartman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Sorry if this is unsettling news, but what's really happening is that you're voting for electors to the Electoral College who have pledged to vote for your candidate and will, presumably, if your candidate wins the popular vote. It's a winner-take-all system, usually statewide, although in Maine and Nebraska, each congressional district decides one electoral vote. But sometimes electors don't vote as they had promised to do. Indeed, in 2016, 7 so-called faithless electors, 5 pledged to Trump and 2 to Clinton, jumped ship and voted for neither of those candidates, which didn't matter because the Electoral College vote wasn't that close. But in another year, a switch in a handful of electoral votes could actually decide who becomes president. In 2000, for example, the final Electoral College vote was 271 for Bush, 266 for Gore. Historical precedent supports the idea that electors indeed can change their mind and vote for whoever they please. That said, the Supreme Court, which previously has never decided this issue, has just taken a case from Washington State which raises it precisely. A decision is expected by June. Way better, to be sure, than the case being before the court in November, when the electoral outcome could hang in the balance.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because democracy and advocacy begin with you, and freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day when 20 laborers who were part of the Civilian Conservation Corps got involved in a type of labor they probably never expected. The Civilian Conservation Corps was a program established by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to get young men back to work during the Great Depression. The program employed men ages 18 to 26 to complete public works projects across the nation. CCC crews planted nearly 3 billion trees, constructed 470 fire towers, built 97,000 miles of fire roads, and constructed facilities at 800 parks across the nation. But snowy weather had ground work to a halt in Allegheny County, Maryland. The men of Company 324 were at the 15-Mile Creek camp waiting for the weather to clear. That's when they received a distress call. A woman was trapped due to the snow. She was in labor, but the 3-mile-long access road where she lived was impassable. Even worse, the state's snowplows were busy digging out other roads. The men of the CCC answered the call. 20 volunteers shoveled the snow by hand, working well into the night so the trapped woman could make it to the hospital to deliver her baby. In total, 30,000 young men working in 200-man crews participated in the CCC in Maryland from 1933 to 1942. Due to its proximity to Washington, D.C., the state was designated the first Corps area. The CCC men helped to build campgrounds, pavilions, and hiking and skiing trails that greatly enhanced the recreation landscape of that state. But for one woman, they were remembered for helping her when she needed it most, during the birth of her child on a snowy day in January. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labor Report recorded on Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. I'm Marc Boulanger. The world's richest people and activists who want to influence them are attending the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Many labor leaders are attending the conference, including Sharon Burrow, the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the body which represents national union centers such as the Ghana Trades Union Congress. Ms. Burrow was asked why she was attending the World Economic Forum.
Well, we bring a team of labour leaders in every year because it's an opportunity to meet with heads of state, with key employers who actually want to change, as opposed to the community employers who think inequality, business as usual is okay. And, of course, it allows us to join in the debates from a worker's perspective. What we see today is, of course, a convergence of crisis. 50 years of the World Economic Forum, but a lot of the prosperity and the opportunity that's been driven by that prosperity hasn't been shared, and indeed it's created the seeds of the destruction, particularly in climate terms, of the human race itself. So there's a lot of talk, but there's not yet the kind of sense of crisis that people are feeling. We're living through an age of anger. It's created by despair. When you look at the ILO report that shows that wages since the early 90s have just gone in a downward trend, a slump, and yet we're 3 times richer over 20 years than we were, before that period. And then that's cumulative from the wealth we've created in the last decades. It's not being shared. So when the IMF chief says inequality, if it's not dealt with, will take us into the next depression, the reality is the economic model's failed, and unless we deal with inequality and climate with a new social contract and a new model of economy where prosperity is shared, then that's the future we're creating ourselves.
In terms of climate change, how concerned are you as a trade union leader about what that will mean for workers and workers' rights, possibly changes in terms and conditions, the eradication of certain jobs? Are you particularly worried about that?
Well, the first order of fear is that the extinction of the human race itself. You've got, potentially in the next few decades, a 7-metre sea rise. So think about how many lives and livelihoods that will displace, and we're seeing the beginnings of that with destruction. You're seeing the extreme heat. Look at my own country, Australia. It's burning. And yet we are still dealing with climate denial. Now, yes, there's no doubt that climate action, a net zero economy, in the time span that we now have to achieve it, is painful for workers. We do have to exit from fossil fuels. That's not necessarily a recipe for no jobs in those industries, because energy companies can still be energy companies. They just have to change the mix. We have to, in fact, see every company change, every industry change its fundamental processes to affect a net zero future. And yet that's the challenge. Now, we know that we fought the Just Transition campaign. We can make these changes with Just Transition, which gives people hope. But if you're trying to make them on a failed economic model, where the model of trade is exploitative, dehumanising supply chains, where governments are becoming more authoritarian rather than less, and sitting at the table with workers and employers is possible in a limited number of countries only, then that's the challenge for all of us.
Ms. Burrow was interviewed by Will Goodbody of RTE, Ireland's public broadcaster. And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Marc Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of, maybe around 50 today, a little bit warmer than what we had yesterday. Looking forward to, just a little bit more than a tenth of an inch of rain, but add that up to the third of an inch of rain tonight, and we're going to have more than a third of an inch of rain for the whole day. Pretty foggy throughout the day, or at least throughout the morning, and then will be mostly cloudy with showers during the afternoon. Winds are light and variable. Will pick up out of the south at 5 to 10 miles per hour later on in the afternoon. And actually, I just had an update. The rainfall will be around, a quarter of an inch by the middle of tomorrow. Well, that's quite interesting. And then maybe a little bit of a drying out period in the afternoon on Friday, and then more rain over the weekend. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is good at 21 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure locally is holding steady at 30.18 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles. And relative humidity is pegged at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 46 and cloudy. Paris is 37 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 58 and sunny. Kyiv is 34 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 25 with the ever-present smoke. Hong Kong is 66 and fair. Tokyo is 47 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 84 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 49 and mostly cloudy with a wind advisory on the bay and offshore, plus copious amounts of water falling from the sky. So look out for floods and mudslides, look out. And New York, New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Pinu of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The French Senate voted yesterday, Wednesday, in favor of a bill that would allow single women and lesbian couples access to in vitro fertilization, otherwise known as IVF, the first major social reform of President Emmanuel Macron's term. The bill was passed 160 to 116 in the Senate, where Macron's centrist party is outnumbered by the right-wing Republicans. The bill is part of a broader bioethics law, which in October cleared its first reading in the National Assembly, the lower house where Macron's party commands a majority. The law would unwind some of Western Europe's strictest rules governing medically assisted pregnancies, a campaign promise of Macron. The senators, however, voted down an article approved by the lower house that would have allowed IVF to be reimbursed by French Social Security. Under existing law in France, IVF is available only to opposite-sex couples and only for reasons of infertility, or the risk of transmission of a disease, or a medical condition to the child or either parent. Medically assisted reproduction, such as IVF, is widely available to all women in countries such as Britain, Belgium, and Spain, but France. It has fed into a broader debate about the commercialization of healthcare and gay rights. What was recognized to heterosexual couples must be recognized for homosexual couples, said Socialist Party David Assouline. The legalization of gay marriage in France 6 years ago sparked massive street protests, even though the influence of the Catholic Church was thought to be in decline. The legalization of the gay marriage was also a sign in France has become more socially liberal, and polls show a majority of French people back the bioethics reform. Some opponents of the bioethics bill fear it will pave the way for the legalization of surrogacy. Covenant. Last weekend, 41,000 people marched peacefully through Paris to oppose the bill. Conservative Party Republican Senator Pascal Bory said she regretted that Macron did not have the courage to do a referendum on the issue because debates transcend political parties.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Aaron Sheldrick of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. At the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant north of Tokyo, workers in protective suits are still removing radioactive material from reactors that melted down after an earthquake and tsunami knocked out its power and cooling nearly 9 years ago. On an exclusive tour of the plant spread over 3.5 million square meters, or 865 acres, Reuters witnessed giant remote-controlled cranes dismantling an exhaust tower and other structures in a highly radioactive zone while spent fuel was removed from a reactor. Officials from Tokyo Electric, which owns the plant, also showed new tanks to hold increasing amounts of contaminated water. Work to dismantle the plant has taken nearly a decade so far, but with Tokyo due to host the Olympics this summer, including some events less than 38 miles from the power station, there has been renewed focus on safeguarding the venues. Well, do you think? That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. And, we deserve it. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.